This is really good.
さあご覧なさい。私のスペシャリテ、その真の姿を。
なんだありゃ。
キラキラ輝く黄金色の物体が地鶏肉を包んでいくわ。あれは化けるふりか。
100,000 subscribers? Seriously? How did we get to this point? And I think it had a lot to do with me telling you I was going to eat peanut butter squid once we hit this, and that's what's happening. Let's make some squid stuff. As part of this little 100K celebration, Misen had sent me out one of their really beautiful chef knives. I decided I'm going to be using this knife the entire time. Yes, for everything I can think of for this video. Special thank you to Misen for sending this out. If you guys want your very own chef knife, check out the links below. They're super well made and really affordable, so you really can't go wrong. The first thing we need to make is that chicken stock that Erina uses right at the end, and for this we're going to need 1 onion roughly chopped. You don't have to do anything special with this. We're also going to need 1 whole carrot for this. You don't have to peel it or anything, just leave it all on there, do a rough chop on that as well. I'm also using 4 of these green onions. They're about half green onions because I had them laying around, but we're going to add that to our stock. Now to go full circle, I am using chicken wings for the chicken stock rather than anything else. I was able to find chicken wings on their own, and this is about 2 pounds worth. With about a tablespoon of olive oil in your deep pan, we're going to start searing these off over a medium-high heat. You don't want these too hot because you will have a chance of burning the chicken wings before they brown, so just a medium-high heat. Season these with salt and black pepper just to give them a little bit of love. And we're going to sear these on one side for about 4 to 5 minutes or until you have a little G-bad. You know, like light G-bad. Not super G-bad, just a little G-bad. And if you don't know what G-bad is, check out the links below for your very own G-bad hat. Now, once you have a little bit of color on those, flip them over and immediately add in all of your mirepoix. To this, I'm also going to put in a couple of bay leaves for that good, followed by 1 cup worth of sake, about 3 ounces worth of mirin, and then a total of 4 ounces worth of soy sauce. I don't know why I separated it like that. Now, poke this around just a little bit and watch your onions fly. I don't even know how that happened. How does that happen? Now, we do want to cover this with water. You don't want to add in too much water, just enough to cover the top of the chicken and the vegetables. Bring this up to a nice rapid boil, then bring it down to a simmer. Once it's at a simmer, go ahead and throw a lid on it, and we're going to cook this covered for about 2 to 3 hours or until about 3/4 of the water has evaporated. You won't be left with much liquid, but this is going to be okay because it's going to gel really nicely. Oh, and these chicken wings are so freaking good. Make sure you strain them out, take all the carrots, all the onions, take all that good out of there, fry these up with a little bit of oil later. Chef's kiss, you know what I'm saying? Now go ahead and strain out the rest of your stock into another container. I prefer a measuring cup so that way I can pour this out into a better container once I'm done making a mess. After you're done making a mess, take all of your stock and place it into a squared up dish. The reason why you want it to be in here so that way it's going to be easy to cut later once it's fully congealed. We need to let this cool down for about a full day. Now we are going to be making our own puff pastry for this, and for this we're going to need 1 cup of flour, followed by 3 ounces worth of water. You do want to bring this together with just a fork so that way you kind of incorporate the water very gently without developing too much gluten in that flour. After you've gotten all of your water in there, go ahead and start to bring this together by hand. I noticed that my flour was a little bit dry, so I added in about a half a tablespoon worth of water to try to just bring everything together. You don't want to overdo it with the water though, so just do a little bit at a time until you get that really shaggy looking dough. This isn't going to be overly smooth or anything like that, but just a nice little shaggy boy. Let this rest for about 10 minutes while we work on our butter puck. Now for the butter, I am using this really nice Kerrygold Irish butter. I think it's fantastic. It has a beautiful fat content. I absolutely love this stuff. You're going to need a total of about 5 ounces. Just make sure you don't drop it like I did because that was almost a disaster. But once you have your 5 ounces, we're going to start rolling this guy out. Before we roll it out, we do just cut it up into smaller cubes to make it easier to work with. And I noticed that this butter was starting to soften up, so I was trying to make sure I was very careful with it. I dust mine with just a touch of flour to help me work with the butter, and we're going to start forming this into a puck by hand before we bust out the rolling pin to roll it out into a nice slab of butter. I roll this out to about 1/4 of an inch of thickness, nothing too thick, otherwise it's going to be hard to work with later. Once you rolled out your butter puck, go ahead and place this on a piece of parchment paper, and we do need to cool this down for about half an hour before we start working with it because it has softened up a little bit. Go ahead and pop this in the fridge and just let it hang out for a bit. Now while that's cooling down, we're going to start rolling out our dough. Now I try to roll this out into a nice little square, and there are other techniques for this like putting it in parchment paper, but I'm not going to do that. You don't need to do that. Just try to make it into a square the best as you can. As far as thickness goes, you want this at about 1/4 of an inch thick. Now take your cooled butter puck and roll your dough over the butter puck. Take your time doing this and try to make as best of a seal as you can. If your dough is fighting you just from after rolling it, you can let it rest for about 4 or 5 minutes before trying to roll it out. I was able to roll mine out to a nice little butter puck and dough concoction, and now we're going to start rolling this out for our first fold. Now for the first fold, we're going to be rolling this out again to about a 1/2 inch of thickness. A little bit smaller if you can. I try to get to that 1/4 inch thickness so you get these really nice layers. But you don't want to fight the dough too much. I noticed that my dough started to open up on the bottom just a little bit, so I decided to fold it towards that spot instead, so that way I kind of encapsulate that spot. You want to bring each side towards the middle and then bring the bottom towards the middle and the top back over that piece, so that way you have this nice little plump dough. Now go ahead and roll this out just a little bit to where it's about 1 inch thick, and so that way it's a little bit easier to roll out on the second fold once we pull this back out of the fridge. It was so warm in my kitchen that I had to put this back into the refrigerator constantly to keep it cold. Remember, puff pastry, that dough has to be cold to work with, so keep that in mind while you're working with this. You want to perform 5 total folds at first, and yes, 5. I tried to go for 7, but there's a reason why we're going for 5 total folds. So after your 5th fold, place this bad boy in the fridge and bust out your squid. Now I am using both tentacles and the body for this, but you can use one or the other. I'm not quite sure which one to use, so we're using both. This comes out to about 3 total ounces worth of squid, and we want to make sure that this is pretty nicely minced up, otherwise it won't incorporate into the dough properly. So I chopped up the tentacles, chopped up the body, made sure that everything was fairly uniform, so that way when we go to cook it, it does have a nice uniform shape. Give this a nice chop right before we get ready to saute it. Now in your pan over medium heat with about a tablespoon worth of oil in there, we're going to start sauteing up our squid. Now they didn't give us a good flavor profile on the squid portion, so I'm going to hit this with a little bit of soy sauce and kind of go for that Thai peanut flavor. We're also going to add in just about a teaspoon worth of sesame oil, a little bit of fresh black pepper, give this a stir, and then the final thing we're going to add is a little bit of oyster sauce. Now the oyster sauce is going to give it that nice saltiness as well, but if you want it to be sweeter, also add in about a tablespoon worth of hoisin. Now since our squid is so small, you only need to cook this for about 4 or 5 minutes before it's done. Once it's cooked, place this into a small bowl and bust out your favorite peanut butter. I'm using some really nice fresh organic stuff that I found, and we're gonna hit this with about 1 heaping tablespoon worth of peanut butter. And in the words of Babish, stir until it's homogeneous, because you're trying to bring it together, you know? Now, this may still be a little bit warm, and you don't want this warm at all, so go ahead and cool it down for a few minutes. Once it's cooled down, roll out your puff pastry and then slap this guy on there. You want to make sure that you place it right in the middle and then start spreading this out like some weird, beautiful looking peanut butter squid. There's no way around it. It's peanut butter squid. Just try to make sure the layer is as evenly spread out as possible all over that dough. Then we're going to do the same folding technique where you bring the outsides towards the middle and the bottom and top towards the middle. So that way you have the 6th fold. This is fold number 6, so we're gonna go ahead and roll this one out to a 7th stage. You can see as I'm starting to roll this out that some of that squid and peanut butter is starting to peek through, but don't pay attention to it too much because we are gonna fold this again. Just make sure you are super gentle with it. Once you get this to that about 1/4 inch worth of thickness, we're gonna do our final fold, bringing the insides in, the top and bottom back in, and we're gonna go ahead and roll this out one last time before we store it to be used later. I was super curious as to how this looked, so I cut off a big chunker off the bottom just to kind of see what the layers look like, and I was pretty happy. I could see peanut butter and squid spread throughout. The layers are there, everything is good to go. Now take your puff pastry and place this into a bag or plastic wrap it, and you can keep this in the fridge for up to 3 days, and we're going to be using this on day 2. Now we need to try to make some rice crackers. These are called senbei, I believe, and these are very similar to something like kaki no tane we've used in the past. Now for this, I am going to be using sweet rice flour or mochi flour, but if you can find glutinous rice flour, you're going to be better off. We're going to start off with 100 grams of rice flour, followed by about 90 grams worth of water, just a pinch of salt, and then a crack of black pepper. This is just going to help season everything up just a little bit. The last thing you'll need to add is about 10 grams worth of black sesame seeds. Once you have that in there, give everything a really nice forking. It's going to give it a really crumbly texture, but you want to do this to start incorporating all of your ingredients before starting to mix it by hand. Once you do have it all mixed by hand, mind, you're gonna have somewhat of a roughly shaped dough from that mochi flour. Now once you have this, go ahead and place it onto some parchment paper, and we're gonna roll this out like you would for compound butter, or like when you played with Play-Doh as a kid. Once you have that rolled out, go ahead and bring the parchment paper over the top of it and start rolling this thing just to be a little bit tighter. Once you've tightened everything up, go ahead and remove it from the parchment paper and cut this into equal pieces. I ended up getting about 7 total equal pieces from this. Once you have these cut up, go ahead and ball them up into little tiny dough balls. Do this for each and every single one, so that way you just have them ready to go. Now on another piece of parchment paper, go ahead and lay these out and try to evenly space them out. Place a second piece of parchment paper on top of that, and then go ahead and give them a press. I ended up using a lid for a piece of Tupperware, but you can do whatever you want. Just use a glass or something that's nice and flat. Once you have everything nice and flat, go ahead and bust out your squid. Now, Erina mentioned that she used strips of squid for this, so I tried to cut the squid legs in a way that could lay flat right on top of those senbei crackers. Once you have your squid cut, go ahead and add between 2 to 3 pieces of your squid legs right on top of your crackers and give them a gentle press. They aren't going to go too far into this, and I really think they should have been chopped up, but they did say split squid legs, so we're just going to roll with it. Take 2 layers worth of paper towel and place them on top of a large plate, then take all of your cracker dough and place that on top of those paper towels. Now we're going to pop this whole thing in the microwave for about 3 minutes just to kind of get the cooking process started. Unfortunately, when you do this, some of the squid starts to curl up, but we're just going to roll with it. Glaze each and every one with a little bit of soy sauce, and then once you have that all glazed up, go ahead and start placing each piece onto your baking sheet. These are very delicate, so just be careful when you're transferring them over. I noticed that mine started to break apart just a little bit, but they should be okay if you're careful. Now we're going to bake these at about 325 degrees for about 8 minutes to start, and then check them. If they're not totally done, pop them in for another 5 to 6 minutes. Mine were still a little bit chewy, but the edges were crispy enough, so I went ahead and rolled with it. Now for the actual egg sauce. They mentioned that they had used whole eggs as well as heavy cream to get the sauce started, and they had colored it with a little bit of turmeric to kind of keep that yellow flavor that you would see with eggs. I'm using about 1 cup worth of heavy cream and about a 1/4 teaspoon worth of turmeric powder. Get that swirled up and throw it onto the stove to get heated. Crack both of your eggs into a bowl and start whisking these lightly just to kind of break them apart. You don't really want to incorporate too much air into this, so you don't need to whisk it for too long. Once you have that hot cream ready, go ahead and gently start pouring this cream in. You want to temper the eggs with the hot cream and not pour it in all right away, because we do have to continue cooking this over a double broiler like they had mentioned. Now you want to make sure that your water is just barely at a simmer to have a very gentle heat. If it is too hot and starts to really go to a rolling boil, you're going to end up with, well, like this. You're going to end up with scrambled eggs. You don't want scrambled eggs. These are pretty delicious scrambled eggs, but we don't want scrambled eggs. So now for round 2, just make sure that that water is at a lower temperature, and I did temp this periodically to try to bring it to a total of 155 degrees Fahrenheit. The reason for this is because I'm looking for that magical 160 degree Fahrenheit number to get the eggs to coagulate. Once it's nice and thick, go ahead and strain all of this out, because you will have a little bit of egg here and there that did fully scramble. You don't want that in your beautiful sauce, so just go ahead and make sure that this is fully strained out. We're going to keep this to the side because we're going to be using this within the next hour or so, and it's going to be totally fine. We're almost there, I promise. We just need to remove some of this rib cage from this chicken breast, because this is really the only skin on chicken breast I could find. They did mention that it had crispy skin, so this is going to be kind of a weird way of cooking this. We do need to make sure that this is ready to be seasoned and seared, so that way we can try to get a crispy texture on the skin before we roll it in puff pastry. Normally when you're doing something en croûte, you do just bake everything together and have it ready to go in the oven, but because they mentioned crispy skin, I'm going to try my best to sear this off. So in a pan over a medium-high heat, place it skin side down and sear it for about 5 to 6 minutes until you achieve G-bad, golden brown and delicious. Sear the other side for the same amount of time, 5 to 6 minutes, and let this cool down completely before we start wrapping it with your puff pastry. You want to make sure this is cold, otherwise your puff pastry is going to have a bad time. Now for your puff pastry, cut that bad boy in half until you have about a 5" by 4" square. This is going to be dependent on the size of your chicken breast, so just kind of go with it. You do want to roll this out just a little bit more, so that way you can actually wrap your chicken breast into this glorified hot pocket. Once I had it to about a 1/4 inch thick, I couldn't really figure out how I wanted to wrap this, so I rolled it out just a little bit further and then brought it together as a well, like a burrito. Once you have your chicken en croute burrito ready, you do want to make sure that the seam side is facing down and then just pinch off the sides. Now grab yourself a little tray with a little bit of aluminum foil and hit it with some non-stick spray. Place your chicken en croute right on top of this and then go ahead and chill this for an additional 30 minutes just to make sure it's nice and cold. Once you've chilled it, brush this with a little bit of egg wash, which is just one whole egg scrambled together, and then dock it with a fork. You want to poke a couple of holes in this just so some of that steam has room to escape. Once it's ready to go, pray to whatever god it is you pray to, and we're gonna bake this at 375 degrees for about 30 minutes. After those 30 so minutes, you do want to pull this out and you do want to temp the chicken breast. Insert your thermometer and just make sure that this comes out to about 160 degrees Fahrenheit. It will carry over that additional 5 degrees, so you can just go ahead and pull it once it's there. Now we do need to cut our beautiful aspic. This chicken stock came out really nicely, but we're only going to need a little bit of it. Cut yourself off just a little slice and get rid of that fat cap, and then take your aspic and go ahead and start dicing this up into small little cubes. This does start melting very quickly, so you want to make sure you don't handle it too much. Once you have your little beautiful gelatin cubes ready to go, place that into a bowl and set it into the fridge just so it doesn't melt any further. Now the last piece of mise en place we need is some of our senbei crackers. Again, I had to use some of the edges for this cracker just because they were the crispiest bits, but I also tried to make sure I used a lot of the squid legs that we incorporated. Now it's finally time to plate up. Grab yourself a little bit of sauce and just sauce the middle of the plate just a little bit because we are going to add a little bit more later. Cut off the end of your en croute and then try to get 2 really nice medallions out of this chicken breast. You're probably better off using a serrated bread knife for this, but I really wanted to use the mise-en the entire time we were doing this, so I was stubborn about it. Take one medallion and place it down right into the middle of the plate. Take the second medallion and prop it up next to that piece. Dress it with just a little bit more sauce here and there. Garnish it with your senbei squid sesame crackers. We are almost there. Then hit it with a little bit of your chicken aspic as its final form. You can go hard on this, you can go a little bit on this. That's totally up to you. But Erina's specialty, Oyakodon, is done. There it is, guys. Erina's specialty that she had made for season 4's finale, and this is probably one of the harder things I've made on the channel so far for Food Wars, because you can already see how time sensitive it is. If your sauce is hot and everything else is warm, as soon as you pour your chicken stock on there, it starts to melt just a little bit. The one worry that I really had is because it's chicken on the inside, you do have to cook the chicken all the way through, which means sometimes the crust gets soggy, which I may have run into, but we're just gonna eat this. I'm gonna see what happens. So I really want to make sure I get a bite with everything on it. The chicken is really nicely cooked. It's still steaming hot, which is great. Try to get some of the sauce. The crust on the bottom came out really nice, but cheers. This is really good. This is really good. Holy crap. That egg and cream sauce is super rich, but then you have that really beautiful flavor from the chicken stock that's kind of all melted in there already. Then you have a little bit of crunch from those crackers. The pastry itself is still really nicely cooked. I wish it could have been a little more crispy, but it's really hard with chicken, but all the flavors are so good together. The peanut butter is kind of there. It's more of like a nutty aftertaste. The squid just adds a little bit of saltiness to it. This is good. Definitely taste the peanut butter in that crust. I would probably make this again, but I wouldn't have made it to this point without your guys' support. So I just want to say thank you so much for hitting this milestone. I never thought we would be here, especially within just over a year we've been on YouTube, which is insane. So thank you guys so much. I'm glad I was able to partake in peanut butter squid. If you want to support the channel directly, check out the links below for some really cool merch. We just released the 100K Evolution CHEFPK t-shirt. If you want to check that out, check it out in the links below. My name is CHEFPK. Get subscribed, and remember, keep playing with your food. Thanks, guys. I'm gonna go. It's not bad. Not bad at all.